First and foremost, Happy New Year. Now, I know this is a little bit late, but I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and your celebrations for the holidays brought you joy and peace, and you all feel rested and ready to tackle 2024. And talking of 2024, I wanted to start the new year with a brand new video series that is a little bit different, and one that has the potential, I think, to turn into a rather large series that spans many characters, many eras, and many forms, depending on how it does. And I knew of no better character to start this series off with than Revan. So without further ado, here are 50 facts about the Prodigal Knight. It is widely believed that the name Revan derives from things such as the French word revenge, or the word revanchist, which means to fight for the recovery of lost territory, which is what Revan does in the Mandalorian Wars, so it would make sense. But in reality, Revan was simply named after a D&D character called Revanak, and then the convenient connection to the word revanchist was simply written in after the fact. The character of Revan has technically visually appeared in 8 pieces of animated Star Wars media. Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, the Old Republic MMO and its Galactic Timeline video, the KOTOR remake trailer, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes and his character reveal trailer, and the Clone Wars. Now, for those of you sitting there going, Revan was never in the Clone Wars, what is this guy talking about? You did hear me right, but I did say technically for a reason. Because Revan was fully modelled and ready to be implemented into an episode of the Clone Wars, more specifically the Mortis arc. There is behind the scenes of Dave Filoni talking about Darth Revan and how he was going to be implemented into the Clone Wars, and there is also pre-viz footage to go along with that behind the scenes. However, he was ultimately cut because of George Lucas, who didn't believe that a Sith spirit would appear after death to the son of Mortis. Revan used 4 lightsaber colours in his life: blue during the Mandalorian Wars and Knights of the Old Republic canonically, red during his time as a Sith Lord and in the Shadow of Revan DLC, green when he became a Jedi Master after Knights of the Old Republic, and purple in the Knights of the Old Republic comics and the Old Republic MMO. Revan had the title of Supreme Commander of the Republic military during the Mandalorian Wars. Revan found an ancient lightsaber crystal that was supposedly present at the founding of the Jedi Order 20,000 years before the games, and with its discovery he supposedly fulfilled a Jedi prophecy. Revan had direct control of over 1/3 of the Republic's entire military during the Mandalorian Wars. Revan technically created the Rule of Two. Revan's teachings were discovered by Darth Bane in a holocron on Rakata Prime, who then put those teachings into action, thus creating the Rule of Two. Revan murdered an Echani man called Usanis, who was the father of Brianna the Handmaiden from Knights of the Old Republic 2, in a duel to the death during the Jedi Civil War in an effort to destabilize the Echani. Revan officially died in 3637 BBY on Yavin 4, which was approximately 357 years after he was born, so he was pretty damn old. Revan was directly name-dropped in the novel Darth Plagueis by Darth Plagueis himself. Revan's mask actually belonged to a woman. She was a Mandalorian warrior who stood up to her own people for committing genocide, but because she stood up against them, they killed her in cold blood. Revan saw her heroism in a vision while on the planet Cathar, and noticed afterwards that her mask was beneath his feet in the waters of a beach, and he then claimed it as his own, using it as a personal symbol in his war against the Mandalorians. Revan was not his true name. In fact, his true name has never even been hinted at in any piece of Star Wars media, but unironically he chose the name Revan as a symbol, because he was called the Jedi Revanchist during the early stages of the Mandalorian Wars. It is actually suggested that Revan is using Darth Malak's Jedi lightsaber in the Old Republic, as during the battle in the Temple of Sacrifice, Revan will attack you with a blue lightsaber titled the Blade of Alec. While Revan is often perceived as a grey Jedi by many people, there wasn't one moment in any piece of Star Wars media that considers him so. Now this one is going to be controversial. I can already read the comments now. But Revan never balanced the Force successfully. Despite the very common view of Revan using the light and dark side in balance, he never once did this successfully without there being severe consequences. He was very much corrupted by the dark side when he was Darth Revan, and he was very much one with the light side during Knights of the Old Republic. It was only during the later sections of the Revan novel and the MMO where he tries to use the light and dark side in balance, but he fails miserably in doing so both times. And these attempts to constantly flow between the light and dark sides eventually splits his soul into two. It was Revan who personally freed Juhani from slavery when she was around 13 or 14 years old during the liberation of Taris. Revan has been mentioned several times in the current Star Wars canon as a character who is worshipped by the Sith Eternal. He is first mentioned in the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, and he has a Sith Legion named after him, and he's also mentioned in the novel Shadow of the Sith and has his name chanted by cultists. Despite being able to visit the planets in any order you choose, it's canonically confirmed that Revan kills Calo Nord on Tatooine, meaning that Tatooine is always the second planet that Revan visits. After the events of the game, Revan does return to the Jedi Order, but despite everything that he did for them, the Jedi actually despised him, and they blackmailed him into not sharing any of his beliefs or ideologies in exchange for being publicly recognized as a Jedi Master, and while Revan agreed to this to keep the peace, Bastila hated the Jedi for it. It was Revan who programmed HK-47 to call all organic beings meatbag, and this is because HK-47 called Darth Malak a meatbag out of the blue, and Revan found this absolutely hilarious. Interestingly, Revan's robes were supposedly created by the Starforge, but some of you may realise that this makes no sense, because Revan is seen wearing the robes on Dantooine before he finds the Starforge as a Jedi. Considering that his robes are his symbol of fear as a Sith Lord, it seems odd, but the Revan novel essentially confirms that he's still wearing this outfit after Knights of the Old Republic. He's then seen wearing them again in the Old Republic MMO. And I mean, at that point, they've got to basically be rags. Revan technically fell to the dark side during the Mandalorian Wars because he found Malachor and the Traius Academy. It was here that he discovered the Sith Hermetica and the Sith teachings, and he embraced them and introduced Malak to them as well. However, despite embracing and learning from these Sith teachings, he didn't denounce himself as a Jedi, not until he returned as a Sith Lord. The Jedi vs. Sith Essential Guide claims that Revan and Malak were the first known Dark Lords of the Sith, at least in the eyes of the Jedi and the Republic, to use the title Darth. But this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because Zane Carrick calls Jarael Darth Sunshine in the KOTOR comic books before Revan takes up the title. Despite waging war against them, Revan was actually keeping a lot of the Republic's key infrastructure intact, such as its military and its economy. For example, he killed the Achani leader Usanis to ensure that the Achani didn't gain a foothold within the Republic Senate. Additionally, he kept a lot of the Republic's shipyards intact, and he purposely assassinated political leaders who were leading the Republic astray. The visual design of Revan was initially credited to lead character artist Mike Spaulding, however concept artist John Gallagher refuted this claim in 2023 by saying that he was tasked with creating the character's design, stating that he was given a 3-line description saying that Revan should be mysterious, visually androgynous, and having a Mandalorian mask with a tribal feel. Revan, along with many other Sith Lords, were initially planned to appear in The Rise of Skywalker, and they featured in concept art. There was to be a giant stone mural in the walls of Exegol that featured some of the most iconic Sith Lords carved into it, and Revan was going to be one of them. Revan's lightsabers are always visually mixed up. Many people think that the Starforge-y, spiry looking lightsaber is his Sith lightsaber, when in actuality that was his Jedi lightsaber. The more plain lightsaber hilt is actually his Sith lightsaber. This mistake is even made in an official piece of Star Wars media, that being Galaxy of Heroes, where Jedi Knight Revan is actually wielding the Sith lightsaber and Darth Revan is actually wielding the Jedi lightsaber, which is even more ridiculous given the fact that they made this documentary post about how in-depth they went in getting these characters' designs right, and yet they made these massive design blunders. Staying on the topic of Galaxy of Heroes, they recently introduced the Leviathan into the game, which is the capital ship of Saul Karath in Knights of the Old Republic. And yet for some unknown reason in Galaxy of Heroes, Revan is the one who pilots it, and it's considered to be Revan's capital ship, which makes no sense because in Knights of the Old Republic, Revan has nothing to do with it. Darth Malak originally wanted to use HK-47 to assassinate the Jedi Exile after the Mandalorian Wars. However, Revan refused this idea and effectively saved her life by stating that she was a Jedi who was already dead, and he purposely let her go back to the Jedi Order to face punishment to show them just how much their teachings had failed them. After Revan built HK-47 and realised just how effective he was in assassination, he then actually modelled and created the HK-50s you see in Knights of the Old Republic 2. He was also the one who built the secret HK manufacturing plant on Telos to build them en masse, but the Jedi captured him before he could put them into full production. Despite being the one to discover it and using it as his key weapon of war, Revan was actually very wary of the Starforge. In fact, it's noted many times that Revan barely spent any time near it due to the fact that it affected people's minds. In the time of the Old Republic, when he was supposedly dead for hundreds of years, Revan had an entire order of dedicated followers that infiltrated the Republic, the Jedi, and the Sith Empire, who believed that Revan's ideologies were actually the way to go, and they called themselves the Revanites. After studying it intensely, Revan actually believed that the technology of the Starforge was infinite, musing that it would have been possible to create an entire galaxy if manipulated properly. Revan actually knew Atton Rand from Knights of the Old Republic 2, as Revan trained Atton to be part of an elite special forces unit with a very specific set of skills that were designed to capture Jedi and break them until they converted to the Sith. Revan took a tiny little fragment of the Starforge for study that was no bigger than a fingernail, and he then gave it to a group of Ongri to look after. Before he left, he then taught these Ongri that if they fed the fragment the matter of their dead, it would sustain them by giving them back whatever they needed to survive. He then built an entire complex for the Ongri around the fragment, which over the next 300 years grew into a big machine known as the Infinite Engine, which was the size of a tank, which sustained the Ongri for generations. They then worshipped him as the Revan. The Thought Bomb, which was a devastating weapon used by Darth Bane, only existed because Darth Revan transcribed the knowledge of an ancient Sith ritual that was used by Emperor Vitiate into a holocron, which Darth Bane then found. It was actually Revan who was responsible for the Sith Emperor not attacking the Republic for over 300 years, and then calling a truce after the sacking of the Jedi Temple during the war, because Revan was imprisoned and connected to the Emperor's mind, and he used this connection to essentially calm the Emperor down and convince him that peace was the best option. Revan and the entire Ebon Hawk crew were all memorialized as hollow statues on the planet Corellia, and these statues were still present over 300 years after the Jedi Civil War. Despite being imprisoned for over 300 years, Revan was actually feeding off of the Force energy of the Jedi exile Meetra Surik, who at this point was a Force ghost. He was using this sustenance to essentially strengthen himself in his mental war against the Emperor. Much like his Sith robes, a lot of outside Star Wars media has Revan wearing the Starforge robes as a Jedi Knight, these being the white robes that the Starforge creates. And again, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because they were created by the Starforge, and it would have been impossible for Revan to have worn them as a Jedi. Revan was actually traumatized by the destruction of Malachor V. Despite the fact that he was the one that ordered the creation of the mass shadow generator and caused the devastation in the first place, he went out of his way afterwards to ensure that no kind of mass devastation ever happened again, instead electing to create assassin droids to eliminate political targets as a means of control. Darth Revan was the reason Darth Malak had no jaw, as the two of them got into a heated fight that resulted in a lightsaber duel and concluded with Malak's jaw being sliced clean off. Revan was trained at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant and the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. The devastation of Telos IV was actually one of the key turning points in the relationship between Revan and Malak. Revan intended to use Telos IV to his advantage and viewed it as a key piece of Republic infrastructure, but Malak went against Revan's orders and had it destroyed in cold blood, which caused nothing but further tension between the two already conflicting Sith Lords. Revan and Bastila went on to have one child, a son called Vanna, but Revan sadly never met him. Also, despite being the son of one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history, Vanna was completely devoid of any Force sensitivity. Revan had 6 titles bestowed upon him in his life, those being the Revanchist, the Jedi Crusader, the Revan, Revan the Butcher, the Prodigal Knight, and of course, Darth Revan. Revan is voiced by 4 different people across all media. He is voiced by Reno Romano in Knights of the Old Republic, and Charity James, who voices the female Revan, and then in the Old Republic he's initially voiced by Jeff Bennett in the base game, and then he is replaced by Spencer Garrett, who continues to voice Revan in the Shadow of Revan expansion. And finally, we have made it to number 1. The most interesting fact about Revan that you probably have never heard of, and that is, the Mullet Man is canon. Well, at least canon to non-canon. Thanks, Disney. But there we have it, 50 juicy facts about Revan, some of which you may have known, some of which you may have not. Let me know down in the comment section below if you did learn anything new about this iconic character. As I said all the way back at the beginning of the video, this is planned to be a new series and I intend to cover Darth Nihilus next. So if you want to see that, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you're notified, and like this video to tell YouTube that you had a really fun time. And if you did enjoy this video, you should check this video out. It's a deep dive into why the redemption of Revan is actually a dark, dark lie. I'll see you there.